She was told she wasn't pretty enough. Studio executives looked at her and saw nothing they could sell. She was told to sit down and behave. Instead, she became something far more dangerous than pretty. She became unforgettable. Most stars of her era are remembered for being beautiful or charming. But Bette Davis is remembered for being difficult, in the best possible sense of the word. She fought for her parts, fought her bosses, and fought the idea that an actress had to be soft to be loved. She was born Ruth Elizabeth Davis on April 5, 1908, in Lowell, Massachusetts. Everyone called her Betty as a child. Later, she changed the spelling to Betty, and that small act of self-revision says more about her than a paragraph could. Her father was a patent attorney named Harlow Morrell Davis. Her mother was Ruth Augusta Favor, who went by Ruthie. They were a respectable New England family on the surface. Underneath, the marriage was already coming apart. The split happened when Betty was a young girl. Her father left, and the comfortable picture of family life vanished with him. From then on, the household was run entirely by her mother. That fact shaped everything that came after. Ruthie did not collapse. She took her 2 daughters and kept them in motion, moving around New England wherever there was work. She picked up photography as a trade and built a living out of it through sheer effort. Betty grew up watching that. She watched her mother get up every day and grind to keep 3 people fed and housed without a husband. The lesson sank in deep. The idea that a man would come along and rescue her never really took root. She also grew up with a younger sister, Barbara, called Bobby. The 2 girls were close and were shuttled together through boarding schools and rented rooms. Money was a constant worry, and Betty learned early that nothing arrived for free. The constant moving left its mark on her. She did not have a stable hometown or a settled childhood circle of friends. What she had instead was her mother's ambition for her, and a growing sense that she would have to make her own way entirely. She started young and never really stopped. The acting bug bit her as a teenager. She saw silent films and stage plays and felt something click permanently into place. She decided, with no encouragement from anyone, that this was the life she wanted. She enrolled at Cushing Academy and threw herself into school productions. She was not the obvious beauty of her class, and people told her so. Rather than shrink, she simply doubled down on the one thing she knew she could do, which was act. Her path into the profession was not glamorous in the slightest. She worked as an usherette at a playhouse on Cape Cod, showing other people to their seats so she could stand at the back and watch. She studied dance and drama in New York City. She landed a spot in the Stock Theater Company in Rochester for a stretch. Stock work meant a new play every week, learning lines fast, and performing constantly for little money. It was unglamorous and exhausting, and it taught her how to actually work. By 1929, she had made it to Broadway in a comedy called Broken Dishes. The play ran for months and got her real attention. In the theater of that era, a young actress who could hold an audience for a full run was someone worth watching. Hollywood eventually came calling, the way it did for promising stage actors. The movies were hungry for fresh faces, and talent scouts trawled Broadway looking for them. Davis got the invitation west that thousands of girls dreamed of. Then came the part nobody likes to dwell on. Her first Hollywood screen test was a flat failure. A studio man reportedly said she had about as much sex appeal as a certain unglamorous object, and the cruel line made its way back to her ears. She signed with Universal Pictures, and Universal had no clue what to do with her. They put her in forgettable films in forgettable parts. The studio system was a factory designed to stamp out a recognizable type, and she stubbornly refused to be that type. The trouble was that she did not look or behave like the other contract girls. She was not delicate. She had enormous, restless eyes and a clipped, precise way of speaking that made her seem like she was always one thought ahead of everyone in the room. That quality unsettled the men who ran things. They wanted pliable. They wanted sweet. What they had on their hands was a young woman with strong opinions about her own work and no instinct at all for hiding them. She also chafed at the makeup and the grooming the studios imposed. They wanted to fix her teeth, change her hair, soften her edges into something marketable. She resisted most of it. Part of her appeal, it turned out, was precisely the things they wanted to sand away. Warner Brothers picked up her contract in 1932. At first, nothing changed, and the weak roles kept coming in weak pictures. She was being paid and kept busy and slowly going out of her mind with frustration at the waste of it. Then, in 1934, the studio loaned her out for a film called Of Human Bondage. The part was a cruel common waitress named Mildred, who casually destroys a decent man who loves her. It was the kind of role most leading ladies would not touch. Davis grabbed it with both hands. She played Mildred without a shred of vanity, making her petty and venomous and genuinely unpleasant to watch. Another actress would have softened the woman to stay sympathetic. Davis sharpened her instead. Audiences and critics sat up. Nobody had quite seen a leading lady make herself that ugly on screen on purpose. The performance announced loudly that this actress would rather be hated than ignored. It was the thesis of her whole career in one role. That willingness to be unlikable was rare, and it was deliberate. Most actresses guarded their image because the studios told them their image was their living. Davis took the opposite view. She decided that a great performance mattered more than a flattering one, and she never really wavered from that. Her technique was built on specifics. She used her hands, her cigarettes, her clipped enunciation, and those huge eyes to build characters out of small, precise gestures. Watch her in any of her best films, and you see an actress making hundreds of tiny decisions. Nothing about her work was vague or accidental. When Academy Award nominations came out, her name was missing. The omission caused a public uproar. So many people felt she had been cheated that the Academy reportedly adjusted its voting rules in the aftermath. Being snubbed had made her famous. The next year, she did win the Best Actress Oscar for a film called Dangerous. A lot of people, including Davis herself, suspected it was an apology prize for the year before. She thought the performance was merely decent and said so. Now she had a gold statue and still had no control over her own work. Warner Brothers kept handing her scripts she found insulting. She was a proven, award-winning talent being squandered on material she despised, and her anger over it kept building. So in 1936, she did something almost no actress dared to do. She walked away. She accepted an offer to make 2 films in England and openly defied the contract that chained her to Warner Brothers. She would rather risk everything than keep saying yes to junk. The studio responded by suing her. To dodge being served with papers in America, she fled to Canada first. The case finally landed in an English courtroom in the autumn of 1936, and it became headline news on both sides of the Atlantic. The lawyer representing Warner Brothers waved her away as a naughty young lady who simply wanted more money. It was a neat, dismissive line designed to make her look spoiled. It also completely missed the point of what she was after. Money was not the issue. She wanted the right to turn down bad pictures. She wanted scripts that would actually let her act instead of decorate. She wanted to be treated as an artist rather than a piece of studio inventory. The court sided with the studio. She lost the case cleanly and was bound by the ruling. She had gambled her whole career on the principle of the thing, and on paper she had just lost the bet badly. She came home to Hollywood in debt, without income, forced to crawl back to the company she had tried to escape. It looked like total humiliation. In truth, it turned out to be the hinge on which her entire life swung. Warner Brothers had learned something. It now understood it owned a genuine fighter, and a profitable one at that. Rather than punish her, the studio quietly started giving her the strong parts she had been demanding all along. She had lost the battle and won the war. The fight also mattered beyond her own career. She had been one of the first major stars to openly challenge the iron grip of the studio contract system. A decade later, another actress, Olivia de Havilland, would win a landmark case against the same studio. Davis had helped show that the stars were not entirely powerless. The roles that followed transformed her into a real power. In 1938, she won her second Oscar for Jezebel, playing a willful, reckless Southern woman who ruins her own life through pride. The most fertile stretch of her career had officially begun. Then came Dark Victory, in which she played a wealthy young woman dying of a brain tumor. She had fought to get that film made, and it became one of her defining performances. Audiences wept in the aisles, and she had her proof that she could carry a serious drama entirely on her own shoulders. For several years there, she was the single most profitable star on the Warner lot. People around the studio half-joked that she was the fourth Warner brother. The girl with no sex appeal had become the financial engine of one of the biggest film companies in the world. Through the early 1940s, she kept the momentum going with one strong drama after another. She played wronged women, scheming women, and dying women, and she made each of them feel like a full person. She also gained real power on the lot, weighing in on scripts and directors in ways few actresses could. She became, for a time, the unofficial standard for serious screen acting in America. Younger performers studied what she did. The fan magazines that had once doubted she could be a star now treated her every move as news. She had bent the whole machine to her will. The war years deepened her standing in a different way. She helped found and run the Hollywood Canteen, a club in Los Angeles where servicemen on their way to the front could get food, music, and a chance to dance with actual movie stars. She put real work into it. This was not a token gesture she phoned in for good press. She organized it, recruited the talent, and showed up to serve coffee and chat with soldiers herself. It became one of the achievements she remained most genuinely proud of for the rest of her life. The canteen gave thousands of servicemen a few hours of ordinary pleasure before they shipped out. For many of them, it was the last good night before the war swallowed them. Davis understood the weight of that and treated the place with a seriousness she did not give to most of her films. Her private life, meanwhile, was a far messier business. She married 4 times. 3 of those marriages ended in divorce, and the 4th husband died while still married to her. She would say later that she had never been good at being a wife. Her first husband was a band leader named Harmon Nelson. The marriage buckled under the simple weight of her career and her paycheck, which dwarfed his completely. A man married to a woman that powerful in that era had few good options, and the union did not survive. Her second husband, Arthur Farnsworth, died with shocking suddenness in 1943. He collapsed on a Hollywood street and never recovered from the fall. She was a widow before she had even turned 40, blindsided by it. Her third marriage finally gave her the thing she wanted most: a child. In 1947, she gave birth to a daughter she named Barbara, the girl everyone would come to know as BD. The husband was a man named William Grant Sherry, whom she later described as violent. By 1950, her position at the studio had cracked badly. She was dumped into a flop called Beyond the Forest, loathed every minute of it, and got herself released from her Warner Brothers contract. Once she was a free agent, though, the offers dried up far faster than she had expected. She was 42, and the industry was already quietly preparing to write her off as finished. Aging actresses were not supposed to have second acts. Then, a script arrived that would hand her the greatest role of her later years. The film was all about Eve. She played Margot Channing, a celebrated stage star who slowly realizes that a sweet-seeming younger woman is maneuvering to take everything she has. The part was practically tailored to everything Davis understood about ambition, fear, and growing older in a business obsessed with youth. The film became an enduring classic, and her performance is the backbone of the whole thing. She delivered her lines with a weary, knowing bite that no younger actress could have faked. On set, she fell hard for her co-star, Gary Merrill. They married not long after, and it became her 4th and final marriage. It also produced a complicated household. She and Merrill adopted 2 children, a boy named Michael and a girl named Margot. Margot suffered brain damage and was institutionalized while still very young. The marriage to Merrill lasted 10 years and was, by most accounts, stormy and difficult. By 1960, it had ended in divorce like the others. Through all of it, across 4 husbands, she had essentially raised her 3 children alone. The single mother she had watched as a girl had become her own life. The 1950s turned lean for her. After the triumph of All About Eve, the big roles thinned out, and she took whatever work she could find, including stage jobs she frankly hated. The phone simply was not ringing the way it had a decade earlier. Money pressures piled up too. Court battles, a luxury lifestyle, private schools for her children, and the support of her mother and sister had all drained her. She was a 2-time Oscar winner who genuinely needed the next paycheck. That need would shape her next big decision. Then, in 1962, she took a part that brought her roaring back from the edge. The film was Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, a grotesque thriller about 2 aging sisters trapped together in a rotting Hollywood mansion. Her co-star was Joan Crawford. The 2 women had circled each other with open dislike for decades. The bad blood reportedly traced all the way back to the 1930s and a man they had both wanted. Casting them as warring sisters was lightning in a bottle, and everyone involved knew it. Davis threw vanity out the window once again. She troweled on chalk-white pancake makeup and played Baby Jane Hudson as a deranged, delusional former child star clinging to a glory long gone. It was bold and genuinely ugly, and it earned her yet another Oscar nomination. The tension between her and Crawford off-camera became Hollywood legend. The 2 needled and undermined each other throughout the shoot, and the stories have been told and retold and exaggerated ever since. Under all the embroidery, though, the mutual contempt was perfectly real. The film was a surprise hit, and it handed Davis an entire second career in horror and psychological thrillers. She kept working steadily through the 1960s and well beyond. on the big screen and on television, long after most of her contemporaries had faded into retirement. She leaned into the new chapter without complaint. She took roles in thrillers, on television movies, and in guest spots, treating the work as work. Some of the films were beneath her talent, and she knew it. She did them anyway, because she would rather be acting than be idle. There was something almost defiant in her refusal to retire gracefully. Other stars of her generation accepted that their time had passed. Davis simply kept showing up, kept taking parts, and kept reminding the industry that she was still there and still capable. She also wrote about herself with unusual frankness. In 1962, she had published a memoir called The Lonely Life, looking back at her own story without the soft focus most stars used. The title was not chosen by accident. She knew what her ambition had cost her. The hardest blow of her later years did not come from a studio head or a critic. It came from her own daughter. In 1985, Bette published a book called My Mother's Keeper, and it was a knife aimed straight at her. The book painted Davis as an alcoholic, manipulative, bullying mother who made her family miserable. It was immediately compared to Mommy Dearest, the notorious tell-all that Joan Crawford's daughter had written about her. For Davis, of all people, that particular comparison must have stung beyond words. What made the timing genuinely brutal was the state of her health. She had been diagnosed with breast cancer and undergone a mastectomy. Around the same stretch, she suffered a stroke that left her partially paralyzed, and she had broken a hip on top of it. So the book hit the shelves while she was frail, ill, and fighting for her life. Public sympathy ran heavily against BD for the cruelty of the timing. Many people saw the daughter as an opportunist cashing in on a mother who might not survive the year. Davis was wounded by it in a way the lawsuits, flops, and feuds had never managed. Her longtime assistant later said the betrayal took something out of her that she never got back. She cut her daughter off completely and never reconciled with her. There was a cruel irony buried in the whole affair. The woman who had built a career playing manipulative, monstrous characters now stood accused by her own child of being one in real life. Whatever the truth of the book, the public did not buy it, and the daughter's name became a symbol of betrayal rather than her mother's becoming a symbol of cruelty. She also rewrote her will. She disinherited BD and BD's children entirely, cutting them out without a dollar. Her estate went instead to her adopted son Michael and to her fiercely loyal assistant, Catherine Cermak. It was a final, deliberate verdict on who had stood by her. Even broken in body, she flatly refused to stop. She kept her cancer diagnosis private and went on accepting work and honors and interviews. She had already become the first woman ever to receive the American Film Institute's Life Achievement Award, a fitting marker for a one-of-a-kind career. In 1989, the cancer returned, and she was given only days to live. She had been invited to a film festival in Spain and was absolutely determined to attend it. Against the odds, her doctors cleared her to make the long trip overseas. In San Sebastian, a crowd waited for hours simply to catch sight of her, and a band played as she arrived. She accepted the festival's tribute, weak but fully present and gracious. It was the kind of public farewell that almost no one gets to have. On the journey home, she grew too sick to continue and was taken to a hospital just outside Paris. Bette Davis died there on October 6, 1989 at the age of 81. She had spent 6 full decades standing in front of audiences and refusing to be ignored. In 1999, the American Film Institute ranked her the second greatest female star of classic Hollywood, behind only Katharine Hepburn. It was a high placement for a woman who had been told she could not be sold at all. The ones who doubted her had all been answered. What she left behind is far larger than any single picture in her filmography. She left a blueprint for an actress who declined to be likable, declined to be managed, and absolutely declined to disappear quietly. The eyes, the voice, the temper, the spine, all of it was unmistakably hers. She once said she would never be low-key, that she had fought against being low-key from the very beginning. She believed acting should always be larger than life. And whatever else can be said about her, so was she.